Pripyat is an interesting place. It's actually where Chernobyl is, in the Ukraine. And after, obviously, the Chernobyl accident, the city has been shut down, and you can't go into Pripyat. But a few artists grouped together and have gone into Pripyat. And one of the artists that we're showing is a series of these very haunting images of what the life was like that is no longer there in Pripyat. And what was interesting about what this project, so this project obviously is only for the artist to experience doing it, and the photographs that came out of it, because nobody's walking down these streets to see this street art. They're not coming across it. And it became very controversial because the question really became is this land that is sacrilegious? Is this land that shouldn't be touched? And the artists have a website, a fantastic website, if you Google it. And this is just one of those artists that went to Pripyat, and again, that act of intervention and what the work means in context with that space. It would only obviously work there.
So one of the amazing things about doing the book is that we really learned a lot about some areas that we weren't as knowledgeable about, and guerrilla gardening was one of those areas. This is a piece called the Pansy Project that I think we probably walked by on our trips to London, and probably most people walk by every day. And what Paul Harfleet is doing is he is marking and showing, making his own statement against acts of homophobia that occur against him. And he's then documenting it and titling the pieces based on what happened to him. So I'll read the title of this piece. It's called Fuck Off and Die Faggot. And I find this really powerful that he's taking that anger and he's going out and beautifying the city. Really, it's
Paul's very interesting. I think it's open. Paul Harfleet has a Facebook page, and I connected to Facebook, and he actually documents every time that he has these experiences and the pansies that he places, and it's really fascinating to connect with it. And as Sara said, we're a little bit privileged, or probably a lot of privilege, in the sense that because we've been so connected to this work for so many years, we know the stories of basically a pansy that you might, as Sara said, walk by. You definitely wouldn't know the history of it. And what we want to do is make sure that we share those stories. And the web is not always the best place to do that. So these types of talks for us is what makes the internet so important. You're in New York, so you probably have come across, or you know what the Ghost Bike Project is about. The Ghost Bike Project has now become an international thing. It's again, is very similar to what Paul is doing with the pansies. This is activists marking with a white bike where a bicyclist was killed and memorializing that. I don't know if you watched, or if any of you were involved. I don't know if you're cyclists here. That over, I think it was 4 or 5 weeks ago, this project became very controversial because the city cracked down very hard on bikes that were being locked against things that weren't official for where bikes should be parked. And they started to remove a lot of the ghost bikes that are there. And the artists and the activists and the city really came out to condemn that. And it just again is this dichotomy of the city and what we need in cities. I think Sara and I, we live on that. We actually live around the corner from where this photograph is taken. That's the Puck Building. And for us, we need this. So whether it's authorized or not, we know that we have to live with advertising. I don't think we're naive, and to be honest with you, sometimes advertising can give it energy, but it's critically important that cities allow for acts of public intervention without authorization, because there's an energy from things that don't have to go through the public channels that is very, very important and very powerful.
So that leads actually right into the next section of the book, which is Deviant Signs and Contra-Consumerism. A lot of the artists are making a statement about public space and about the proliferation of advertising in public space. And think sometimes it feels like if you live in a community, you have no control over the number and the amount of advertising that comes up and grows on the walls, as well as you don't have any control about the art that emerges in your neighborhood, which is usually very little compared to the advertising. So a lot of artists are out there reacting to the ads. Again, we'll take a sort of a walk back in time to David Hammond, who's doing a performance piece. He's actually commenting on a couple things. One thing is commenting on the art market, because he's selling his snowballs priced according to size, which I love. But in addition, he comments that the piece is also one about race and the fact that here is an African-American man selling something that's basically useless, and it's a commodity, and you know, that's where he is. He's actually lined up on the street with a bunch of other vendors selling things.
So the Billboard Liberation Front, if you're not familiar with the work that they've done starting in San Francisco, definitely go Google all of these artists. I mean, you know, hopefully all of you are writing these names down, because there's an immense amount, for some of them, information on the web. And we're very impressed by the Billboard Liberation Front. And I think Sarah and I, when we met them a few years back, I think we were a little bit taken aback, because we made the assumption that if anybody was going to be anti-advertising, it would be the Billboard Liberation Front. That's what they do, right? And what was fascinating is that they were like, no. We're not anti-advertising. We actually believe that everybody should have a billboard, and that it's not about the advertising, it's about the control of the advertising and what the messages of the advertising are. And so historically they've gone and they've done an immense amount of public interventions. This, you know, the Marlboro and the Yawn. What also we loved, a little anecdote that we learned that they told us when we met, was they also recognize the process, and so when they do a liberation, usually it's a performance, which I'm going to speak about in a minute, but they leave a bottle of whiskey, Jack Daniels, and a 6-pack of beer on the billboard when they leave after doing the intervention, with a little note to the person who has to go and change it back to the ad saying, sorry we did this, we know that it's a pain in the ass for you guys. And that's really this feeling that it's not about vandalism for vandalism's sake, it's about saying, hey, maybe the ads should not have the power that they have. Now, what's interesting, and it's not so much from this image, but what Sarah and I talk about a lot is that if you think about ads, the frequency that one needs to have on the streets to get an impression is huge. So if you go down Houston Street, you're going to see the same ad 10 times on those bus shelters. So do they really have power? Certainly one ad doesn't have a power. That's why they do 50 of them as you go down Houston Street. So if an artist changes the ad, and Sarah's going to go through a great project on that, which is more interesting? Is the ad more interesting after an artist has adjusted it, or is the ad better before the artist adjusted it, which is a big part of it? I mentioned site-specific work, and this is a project which for us signifies everything about what we love about site-specific work. So let me explain this a bit. This is Chicago. This is an area of Chicago. Unfortunately, you can't see, I didn't get a photograph of the house. This is an area that's going through regentrification, and there's a lot of issues of property value and property taxes because of the fact that the neighborhood is changing, and some people can afford it, some people can't. So obviously we're looking at very cheap city-laid gray slabs of concrete that are the sidewalk. And unlike me, or most of you, we probably could walk by walk on that sidewalk, by that house a million times and not see it as a Monopoly board. But that artist did. And what the artist then did was they went back to their studio, they cut a stencil that would only work in that one area. It wouldn't work anywhere else, and so it has one use. And the one thing that people don't realize, unless you do it, like Leon does it, and you do it, is this is not cheap. You know? So not only is the risk of arrest expensive because you're going to have 3 days in jail, you're going to have to pay the fines to do it, but making these stencils, buying the paint, so the motivation of these artists to change the city, to make it better than what it would be, is a huge motivation. So when you compare that against the act of vandalism, this is not about something that's very frivolous. Some of the pieces that are done, and I know Leon's pieces, are extremely expensive to do, and they might last 30 seconds, and the artist might have 3 days in jail for doing it. So the person that does that is a very unique and special person.